Test, test, test. Test, test, test.
Test, test, test.
So, blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah.
because this topic is not just political for me, it's deeply personal. I was targeted with Pegasus spyware. While leading the opposition's election campaign, my phone was dear colleagues, dear speakers, dear participants. Thank you so dear colleagues, dear
Test, test. Test, test, test. Test, test, test.
Francesco?
Hello, I'm here.
Thank you. Could you please mute your microphone for now? Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much.
So welcome everybody here in the room, but also those who are connected online. Tonight we are talking about spyware surveillance, about the question how, with all these challenges, we can secure democracy, media freedom, fundamental rights, and what can be done precisely to counter the threats, the challenges, now that we hear, in addition to the PEGA committee that we had in the last mandate of this parliament, new reports about spyware, new reports about victims, even though some actors that are maybe using spyware are not talking about victims, but prefer to talk about targets, which makes a big difference. So it's high time to talk about it, and it's high time to ensure that our European Union that is built on values remains a safe place for people, that we protect our freedom, our open spaces for civil society, for journalists and many others. And therefore, I'm very happy that today I can organize this meeting together with my colleague Christoph Breja, who himself was a victim of PEGA in the last mandate. And without any further delay, I'm happy to give the floor to him. Unfortunately, he cannot be with us in person because he is in the US on an important mission, but he prepared a video message, and I hope this will work right now.
Dear colleagues, dear speakers, dear participants, thank you so much for being here today for this important panel discussion. I'm very sorry I cannot join you in person. I'm currently in Washington, D.C., having meetings about the topic of spyware in Poland and more broadly in the EU. Because this topic is not just political for me, it's deeply personal. During the peace government, I was targeted with Pegasus spyware, While leading the opposition's election campaign, my phone was hacked multiple times. Every message, every call, my private and professional life was watched, recorded, violated. It was not about security, it was about power, about silencing and destroying political opponents. My case has been called the Polish Watergate, but this was worse. It involved invisible, untraceable tools that can undermine democracy from the inside. This is not just a Polish issue, it's a European one. Commercial spyware is a growing threat to journalists, activists, officials, and to the security of our entire union. The PEGA committee worked hard to expose this danger. The outcome was great, strong recommendations for more transparency, independent oversight, strict controls, and export restrictions. But we need more than recommendations now, and Europe must act. We need binding EU-wide rules. We need a system to monitor spyware use. We need real accountability for governments and companies, and firm action to control the commercial spyware market. We cannot wait for the next scandal. Yes, the European Media Freedom Act is a step forward when it comes to protection of journalists from spyware, but it doesn't go far enough. Spyware isn't just about media freedom anymore. It's a tool of digital warfare. It distorts elections, spreads fear and weakens our democracies and the rule of law. The US has already taken steps through an executive order of controlling commercial spyware. Europe must not fall behind. I want to thank you, CDT Europe, Mrs. Bridget Sippel, our partners, and all the incredible speakers gathered today. Thank you for pushing this debate forward and for standing up for the truth and democracy. I wish you a meaningful discussion. Let's make things happen.
Thank you very much, Christoph. And I think there is not much I can add at this point to his really very good introduction. I only would like to add, before giving the floor to Sylvia for the further moderation of this debate, that it doesn't matter really if spyware or in more general surveillance is used by private actors or by state actors. In both cases, the damage can be very broad, and in both cases, we need to be active. And I fully agree when Christoph said, yes, we had a great result from the PEGA committee. We had very good recommendations, but now it's time to bring those recommendations to practice. Otherwise, things will not change. And therefore, I'm very happy that we will have the debate. And I'm not sure if I should directly pass the floor to Francesco, or if you would like to intervene in between.
I would just like to thank you both, Birgit and Christoph, for giving the opportunity to co-facilitate this debate. I think your leadership has been vital in making sure that this topic remains very high in the agenda, and that we continue to raise the alarm about the fundamental rights abuses and the severe impact that the proliferation of spyware technologies have on democracy and the rule of law in the European Union. So for us, it's a real honor to be able to do this alongside you both. I would just, before I pass the floor to Francesco, I would like to thank you for being here in person with us, but also for those who are joining. Can you hear me now? Better? Yeah. So for those who are joining online, we are going to engage in a debate in a second, but there will be an opportunity for asking questions. So if you're joining online, make sure that the questions you can put your questions in writing, and then we'll get to those later on. Now I think we can, yes?
I just forgot one important point, sorry to interrupt. I'm very happy to see all the participants in this event, but I would like to mention that this topic is so important that I'm very happy that also the EDPS tonight is with us, so welcome to this debate.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Indeed, it's very important that you're here. So yes, before we move on to the debate, we count on the very important presence of Francesco Cancellato, who is going to help us set the stage. I'm delighted to begin by welcoming someone who can speak to the very real and very personal impact of spyware abuses. Francesco Cancellato is an Italian investigative journalist, editor-in-chief of Fanpage, one of Italy's most widely read independent online newspapers. And he was one of the first victims to come forward publicly this year after being alerted by WhatsApp in January that he had been targeted with Paragon spyware. He will share his experience and reflect with us on what spyware abuse means for investigative journalism and the wider democratic implications. So Francesco, thank you for being here. You have the floor.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Is everything okay?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, so, well, I discovered that I've been spied on the afternoon of January 31st. I discovered it through a message on WhatsApp. It was sent by an account called WhatsApp Support. The message told me that my phone has been compromised and everything in it had been infected by a spyware called Graphite, produced by the Israeli company Paragon Solutions, sold only to 35 democratic governments. CitizenLab, the research center that conducted preliminary investigation on Paragon, called me and told me to put the phone in airplane mode and turn off the Wi-Fi and never turn it off the phone, because they could realize anyone who spied on me, that I had discovered them and delayed the traces. That day, I was shaken. But anyone I told told me it was surely a joke, a misunderstanding, or a scam. I didn't think I deserved something like this. And perhaps no one who talked to me thought I deserved it either. When we decided to make the news public, many wrote on social media that I wasn't important enough to be spied on. Others said that if I have nothing to hide, I shouldn't worry. 3 days later, their government said it would investigate the issue. However, the morning after, 3 international newspapers said that my government had forgotten to mention that they were among Paragon clients. They also said that the Italian contract had been turned up by Paragon for serious violation of ethical terms. The government denied this was true and threatened lawsuits for those claiming it spied on journalists. But 15 days later, the government also said that the contract has been suspended by mutual consent of both parties. Meanwhile, the COPASIR, the Italian Intelligence Oversight Committee, had started its investigation. And the intelligence service said that they had not spied on anyone, neither Mediterranean activist nor me, a journalist. However, a month later, the government admitted to spying on the activist. Regarding me, they said my name was not in the intelligence secret service servers. So the case was closed. They supposed they had closed the case. They probably say I had spied on myself or maybe someone abroad. Definitely not them, not the government. Unfortunately for them, a few days later, the same message was sent to another colleague from Fanpage, Ciro Pellegrino, then to another Italian journalist, Roberto D'Agostino, editor-in-chief of Dagospia, a gossip, half gossip, half investigative online newspaper. And according to CitizenLab, to another prominent European journalist who, like Ciro, as the fingerprint of Paragon client on his phone, the same fingerprint of the same Paragon client. So no, the case is not closed, but the government continues to remain silent. 6 months have passed since January 31st, and so far, Giorgia Meloni has only said that she only answers important questions. Apparently, for her, this story isn't one of them. For her, it's not important that 3 or maybe 4 journalists and some investigative journalists had been spied on in a European democracy. And it's not important that that weapon has ended up illegally in some private espionage center or has been used by intelligence service from some foreign country against Italian citizens. And it's not important that undefined individuals had to access to confidential sources, conversation, photograph, and documents of an Italian investigative journal that did important investigation on the government parties, put it at risk the privacy, among others, of members of parliament and senators of the Republic. And for Giorgia Meloni either, it's not important that the government still cannot provide, after 6 months, a credible version of what happened in a democracy, especially when they have a supplier like Paragon Solutions who publicly offers to help figure out who was behind it. And I wonder if in a democracy, all of this isn't important: freedom of the press, privacy of citizens, accountability of those in power, the need for truth for the victims or the target. Well, what's really important? Thank you.
Thank you, Francesco, for sharing your story and your perspective with us. Your testimony definitely grounds us in reality and reminds us that behind all these complex debates happening in Brussels about spyware regulation, there are real people who lives and work, whose lives and work are profoundly affected. So there's definitely something that, and it's a perspective that is quite unique, the perspective of victims, or that they like to talk about targets, prefer to call them victims. So this is why this discussion is so important today. So with this in mind, let's turn to our panel and explore these issues a little bit further. So before we dive in the discussion, let me introduce our panelists joining us here today. So first we have Mr. Kazimierz Wojciechowski, who is the Justice Coordinator of the Permanent Representation of the Republic of Poland to the European Union. Then Mr. Audrios Perkauskas, Deputy Head of Unit at DG Connect European Commission, and Brand Hamoud, Surveillance Campaign Lead at Access Now. It is a real privilege to have all 3 of you joining us today, share your expertise on this important topic. So if that's okay with you, we can jump right in. I'll start with Brand. So from your picking up on what Francesco was mentioning, and from your experience at Access Now, a civil society organization has been working, fighting against spyware over a decade. Can you help us understand the broader picture here? How is spyware being used as a tool of digital depression? And what are you seeing in terms of its impact on press freedom and democracy across Europe?
Thank you, Sylvia, and thank you also to my co-speakers. Thank you so much, Francesco, for having to share and reshare your story for a countless number of times. We always need to depend on victims coming forward to keep this debate on the table, high on the table. It seems like here in Brussels, it gets forgotten as soon as we don't have new revelations, which is something that we're constantly asked about, despite the fact that there is so much evidence that is left unaddressed. Thanks, Sylvia, for your question. I think that, as Francesco said, the Italian cases are yet another proof of a pattern that we've been seeing for over a decade, or at least since the Pegasus project. with many journalists, I mean, thousands at this point being targeted across the world, a lot of them being in Europe, a lot of them being European citizens, or a lot of them being journalists in exile seeking safe haven in Europe, only to be targeted by spyware here. Think Galina Timchenko, for example, who was revealed as a victim of spyware a few years ago. So indeed, as you said, this is a wider pattern that we're seeing of digital authoritarianism within democratic regimes within the EU, nonetheless, where journalists are routine targets of spyware. And not only journalists, but civil society actors, humanitarian workers, as we've seen with the Italian cases as well, which shows, the rampant use of spyware. And that has led to an already degrading press freedom or press ecosystem where journalists are not themselves safe. They cannot maintain the security of their sources, which is a sacred pillar of journalism, when they are targeted by spyware and their lives invaded, their work invaded. Spyware renders encrypted communications, well, I don't want to say useless because they are very useful, but it renders them ineffective in keeping their sources secure, and therefore these journalists cannot do their work, which is often investigative work, often work that reveals, that protects other individuals and protects the state itself. But also they cannot keep themselves themselves safe, and it leads to this chilling effect for journalists, where they feel that they cannot pursue their investigations. They feel that they need to protect their families, their loved ones, their circles, and therefore must keep it quiet, lay low, or be more appeasing to the state itself. So we're seeing spyware that was meant to be used for extreme cases or for military contexts being used in civilian context against journalists themselves. And it's signaled to the public that, the state has an implied legality over this overreach and this kind of abuse, where it can monitor and infringe on the rights of anyone that criticizes it, while using national security pretexts. And instead of that national security being maintaining the safety of the public that they should answer to, they instead use it to target that very public, to protect the state itself and the state elite themselves. I will end it there.
Thank you, Rand, for giving that overview, which presents a, I would say, scary picture of how serious of a threat spyware abuse really is in Europe, not just in Europe, but worldwide. But in terms of what can we do here in Europe about it, because indeed the PEGA recommendations have been mentioned, and we have some regulation that was approved in the last Monday, especially the European Media and Freedom Act. But from your perspective, what concrete steps are needed at the European level to really tackle this issue and protect journalists and civil society from this kind of abuses besides that?
So I would say that in Europe specifically, there needs to be a more holistic approach, because at the end of the day, we don't only have end users of member states being users of this spyware, but also we have producers, we have development happening here in Europe. We have an open and free market with many boutique companies popping up here and there and having access to democratic states and being able to polish their images with selling to democratic states. But specifically relevant, and as you said, with the PEGA recommendations that came up after we've seen abuse across the continent with Greece, Poland, Hungary, etc. The EMFA was, I would say, or the European Media Freedom Act, I would say a missed opportunity to protect press freedom and media freedom specifically, which is relevant to our debate to date. With Article 4, as I assume everyone in the room is familiar with, it is supposed or intended to provide some protections against surveillance for journalists, but then it has, well-hidden exemptions around national security and serious crimes, which we all know the issues with that in terms of the vagueness and ill-definedness of that. And I would say this should be the #1 priority at the moment, with it coming in enforcement soon, for the Commission and for the institutions to clarify what the implementation would look like, especially that the language is already exceptionally permissive. And I would say the Italian cases, with Francesco being one of the victims, is exemplary of what will happen with ENFA and what could happen with ENFA. You have, and what is supposed to be the independent oversight body, that the Intel Committee, the COPACIR, that looked into the abuses, and the report was below standard, where they admit to use spyware against humanitarian workers, but say that it's not because of their work, and the provisions activated within the national legal framework are because of national security, but don't provide what is it about their activity that is a national security threat. They don't answer to Francesco Cancellato's case and continue to deny it and say they do not have logs. The company, Paragon, provides or offers support, but they refuse it. In other cases, in David Yambu's case, they say it is outside the remit of the committee. So this is exactly the situation that we will see happening across EU member states, where we will still not have answers, and already legal environments within the member states individually to a large extent are permissive, and now ENFA is permissive. So you kind of have this environment where surveillance can go unchecked, or it's simple and easy to say the national security pretext, and that's it. Yeah.
Thank you, Rand. So you've talked about the problems with the ENFA. So I would like to turn to the Commission now to pick up on this point, particularly considering that the ENFA is entering into force in just a couple of months. I would like to get from you, Mr. Berkauskas, a bit of a better understanding of what concrete steps is the EU taking through this instrument to protect journalists, or plans to take to improve the safeguards contained in the text, particularly the confidentiality of their sources against the use of spyware, and what are the main challenges you're facing in turning these protections into practice across all member states?
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to this interesting and very important debate. So indeed, at the Commission, we very much share the concerns about the chilling effect on journalists, but not only on journalists, but also on sources. So this is what we have to avoid, that journalists and their sources face this chilling effect and then unable to fulfill their democratic role. So then, up to now, we were as the Commission, we were diligently reporting and raising concerns about cases of deployments of spyware that we have seen so far. Going forward, we will have Media Freedom Act as a binding tool, as a more important tool to deal with such cases, and the relevant provisions will enter into application as of August of this year. And I have a much more positive view of Media Freedom Act. You will not be surprised because I had the pleasure to contribute to its elaboration. So I will not go into all the details which are in Article 4, because presumably you know them quite well. But just to reiterate a couple of things. So first, there is general prohibition of spyware, use of spyware against media and journalists. True, there are exceptions, and there are certain conditions under which it is possible. But I would really insist that there is no national security exception. And this battle not to have a national security exception was won with a great help of the European Parliament. And you come to this conclusion by looking not only at ENFA, but at some other recent pieces of EU legislation. So in some other pieces of EU legislation, we do have a clear national security exception. Here we have just a vague recognition of national competence in the field of essential state functions, including national security. So that's completely different. And it's clear from the case law of the European Court of Justice that in such cases, member states cannot escape application of EU law. And this is will be our task, admittedly our hard task, to make sure that this is so. So what we are doing right now, we are focusing on making sure that member states are ready to apply European Media Freedom Act fully as of August 25, including its Article 4. And when it comes to Article 4, two particular challenges are the following. So one particular challenge is that member states check their different laws and adjust them to align them with the Media Freedom Act. So what I have in mind is that it's quite common that member states have not only criminal procedure codes, but also laws regulating criminal intelligence and similar intelligence activities. So in our reading, all of those different laws are within scope, and the safeguards provided by ENFA should be reflected in those different laws, because those different laws are the actual day-to-day tools used by the relevant public authorities. So this is why, in our view, it is important that those laws are adjusted. Of course, as a fallback, it's a regulation. ENFA, it's a regulation, and it's open for anyone who thinks and sees that their rights are infringed to go to court and to argue on the basis of ENFA directly in court. And here we come to the next challenge. So according to the Media Freedom Act, according to Article 4, there is a requirement to make sure that journalists get some help in the exercise of their right to effective judicial protection. So this is our other implementation challenge, to make sure that such structures exist in all the member states. Because of course, understandably, it might be complicated for a journalist to defend their rights under the Media Freedom Act. So this is all I wanted to say by way of introduction. Of course, happy to expand during the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, we've heard very strong criticism about the loopholes in Article 4. I hear that you have different understanding of the said loopholes, particularly when it comes to national security and serious crime definitions and the lack of truly independent decision-making bodies. But how do you plan to address these loopholes in practice when it comes to specifically the national security?
So when it comes specifically to national security, so we will consistently pursue an approach whereby we don't accept this interpretation that if something is vaguely connected to national security, it's outside the Media Freedom Act. So in practice, sooner or later, I think, unfortunately, looking at the existing trends of what is happening on the ground, sooner or later we have another case. And that case will probably be when Media Freedom Act will be in full application. So then we'll have to act on the situation. And potentially a member state might come back saying, no, this is covered by our national security prerogative, to which we will probably then reply, okay, of course you are competent to determine what are your national security interests, but still in pursuing them, you have to abide by the Media Freedom Act. And on other so-called loopholes, well, inevitably there is a debate about this limitation to criminal offenses listed in the arrest warrant framework decision and other criminal crimes, serious crimes attracting certain sanction in the national law of member states. Of course, this could have been better. Inevitably, this is a compromise. We think it's a decent compromise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there will be some questions about that later on, but before then, I would like to move on to Kazimir. particularly as the Polish presidency draws to a close, what concrete steps has the Council taken, or what do you intend to recommend to your successor to ensure that spyware abuses against journalists and civil society are placed more firmly in the Council's agenda than they have been so far?
Thank you, Sylvia, and good evening to everybody. Thank you very much to the hosts and to CDT for a fantastic job you've been doing in past months on this topic. This is an extremely uncomfortable situation for any council representative to speak on a topic like Pegasus, because I need to represent the position of 27 member states, which doesn't exist. On such a comprehensive topic that it's not, one file per se. It's a phenomenon that has a different dimension. But why we've been, answering the invitations from CDT and why we've been so interested in this, and I will be happy to share in a second what we've tried to do. We, as a Polish presidency, is exactly because we wanted to approach the presidency, especially in the area of justice, not shying away from the experience that we had in past years with the rule of law deterioration, but rather the opposite, rather to bring this experience and these lessons to Europe and try to kind of build on that. And of course, the Pegasus scandal, on which Mr. Breza has been speaking so profoundly, is very much part of that gloomy experience. That being said, I'm today not as a Polish government representative, and mind you, even to coordinate a position within the Polish government on Pegasus would require me a few months, so I would not be able to make it here. But I'm here representing the Council, so I will have to unfortunately refrain myself from maybe two foregoing statements. I'm extremely tempted to go into debate about the national security, but maybe we'll cover that later in the Q&A part. But just to say a few words, there seems to be sometimes maybe a misunderstanding as to sometimes we think that Council equals member states. And that the Council is a place where member states should agree or disagree on certain matters. And I need to make a very legalistic and boring comment that Council is only a gathering of member states within the EU law domain. And that indeed puts a lot of constraints on a discussion on Pegasus, on which you have already alluded to in the context of national security, but also, treaty legal basis that we are operating within. Having said that, I think it would be regrettable indeed if the Council was hiding behind the we have no legal basis kind of excuse. That the issue is political, not in a sense that this is artisanal. It is also, by the way, but because it I think touches upon this societal dimension of public debate. And the fact that there was such a distress around this scandals shows that this is what really touches people. And if it touches people, it is political and therefore requires an intervention or reaction of politicians, which we try to organize as the Polish presidency. We tackle this from a slightly different angle that's been discussed so far today. We'd rather tackle this through the angle of access to data. And now let me make a short pause here. The debate on access to data or data retention, on which Mrs. Sippel is very familiar with, seemed to be separate from a debate on Pegasus for some time. However, the more we observe the discussion about data retention, the more we see that it's becoming, I wouldn't say redundant or unnecessary, but it's becoming only a part of a broader problem or phenomenon of digitalization of evidence and of encryption. the member states or law enforcement authorities are genuinely asking themselves a question: how do we deal with the increasingly encrypted environment? And here sometimes comes a temptation or a question whether more intrusive tools are maybe necessary, even if maybe we don't want to use them, to address this. So I'm not saying, this is really important, I'm not saying member states justify using Pegasus and they all use it. No, I would never say that. But I'm saying that one should not see these things in isolation. And because they're not isolated, we could, as the Polish presidency, try to introduce the topic of Pegasus through the doors of the debate on access to data. And in particular, during the last Justice and Home Affairs Council in Luxembourg on the 12th and 13th, coincidentally, both on the Justice Day and on the Home Affairs Day, which speaks to our lack of coordination, on both of these days, the ministers had discussed during the lunch, so in a more informal setting, the topic of access to data, in particular in real time. Those who attended both lunches would be probably surprised how different perspective the Home Affairs and Justice ministers express. But I think there is a realization clearly that the level of intrusiveness of these tools goes well beyond what we have known and on the basis of which we have been building our checks and balances system, our fair trial systems, right to defense, admissibility of evidence, the judicial oversight. I used to get an agreement from a judge that for a period of 1 month, your communication can be wiretapped. Now 1 second of Pegasus means it's basically your entire life. So what does it mean for the judicial oversight? So these are the questions that are yet not addressed, not answered, but there is a realization, there is an acknowledgement that the level of intrusiveness of certain tools shakes the entire system in a way, potentially. And that, I think, requires a reaction. What would be the reaction? I don't know. But what I do know is what already colleagues have said. There needs to be absolutely a holistic approach. There's not going to be ever one legislation that would fix that. That would have to be a series of actions done not only on EU level, but also on member states level. And here I also refer to the PALMA process that the CDT has been following very diligently. And I also like what you said about the importance of legal certainty and comprehensiveness of legal frameworks. It's not enough to have, oh, we have criminal procedural law, MFA is implemented, thank you very much, we can go. I think these new tools, these new phenomena require renewed approach when it comes to legislation. And I think this is a task for many member states, including Poland, that is still ahead of us. But I think it's important to acknowledge that and to keep on working on it. My invitation to the Danish presidency was extremely competent and will be extremely competent exactly at this interplay between security and law and legal framework would be to keep on doing and would be not to be shy to take part in events like this, even though it's extremely difficult for any council representative to speak. So I will stop here maybe and happy to answer any questions or participate in the debate later.
I'm sure there will be lots of questions. And since we are almost at time, I will refrain from having my follow-up question, and I'll just open the floor because I'm sure that sparks a lot of curiosity for a lot of people that want to know more. So if there are any questions in the room now, feel free to raise your hand and open your mic. Of course.
Can you hear me? Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much to all panelists. My name is Lena Ricci. I'm currently working on a PhD on approaches and challenges to governing commercial spyware. It's proliferation, use, and design. And you know, my question goes to the security aspect of securing democracy, right? So we've talked a lot about security or securing democracy from within. the EU in terms of threats to democracy posed by member state misuse of commercial spyware, for example, etc. But what I want to focus on in my question is more the external threats to EU democracy, namely regional democracy, right? So this idea that actually commercial spyware can also be used by threat actors abroad to target persons within the EU. And that on the one hand can be a national security threat, of course, if government personnel is targeted in a certain member state, but it can also be a regional security threat in that actually people in EU institutions are targeted. So we've seen this with Predator being used against an MEP, I believe, for example, but it's conceivable that this is a much broader issue, that the Council, that the Commission could also be affected and have been in certain cases. So my question is, to the Commission, Council, and then also to the LIBE Committee, to what extent have you considered placing this further at the forefront of the agenda of discussions, really? Because at the moment, we're in a situation where actually the EU is helping to fuel these threats to its own security, for example, by allowing exports to third states, potential threat actors, that will then target, these potentially highly desirable targets within EU institutions. And also, it could be an angle for foreign intervention if you think of targeting of certain groups within member states by foreign actors outside of the EU through tools they obtain, potentially even from EU-based companies, which was the case actually in that case of targeting where the European Parliament member, I believe, was targeted with Predator, which was then exported at the time from a Europe-based company. So if you think about this, right, you have this EU dual use regulation, for example, which the Commission has published guidelines on, and there are specific points in terms of internal repression, in terms of human rights considerations that should be taken into account. But there's not really an effort to harmonize member states' understanding of the risk that this poses to regional security. Also in terms of the guidance that national export authorities adopt and apply. So could you, again, to come to the conclusion of the question and restate it, perhaps elaborate on the how you could, or if you have already placed this security concern on the agenda of discussions in the LIBE Committee, the Commission, and the Council? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is an inadvertent question for Birgit as well, but who wants to go first?
Yes, so I am much more competent to talk about the Media Freedom Act than about the broader security landscape. But still, I would like to mention one aspect of this broader security discussion. So, still talking about legal frameworks oriented towards the European Union and what is happening within the European. What will help a little bit is our evolving framework on cybersecurity. So cybersecurity rules are constantly updated and new cybersecurity rules come into play. So of course, the objective is to reduce vulnerabilities of our networks, our devices. So that is also a contribution, let's say, to reduce the risks. Of course, admittedly, not to eliminate them 100%, but at least to reduce the risks. And on the export restrictions, I know a bit less. Probably they could also be part of a solution. But of course, knowing that some of those tools are used in other countries, in third countries, and there is also a limit to what we would achieve. But probably all in all, it makes sense, as my colleague also said, to pursue different paths, and then pursuing those different paths, we will overall increase our level of preparedness, and increase our defenses against such tools.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. Just maybe to add a few points to also to sell our presidency better. There's been this motto of Polish presidency: "Security Europe," and as funny as it's been made by some, I think it was an attempt to turn the attention of the EU towards a realization that we're facing, existential security threats externally. I guess I would sympathize with the comment that there's maybe limits as to how export bans can prevent these threats, but I think you're at the same time making a very good point that they do. Yeah, just maybe a bit on the pessimistic side. I think we are in a way at war, and these threats will continue to grow, and we need to find ways to defend from them through radically improved cybersecurity capabilities. Having said that, it would indeed be cynical, if not just wrong, to benefit from trading on tools like this, while at the same time defending from them. So, good luck with your research, and I look forward to reading your PhD once it's done.
I think Birgit also wanted to come in to.
Yeah. Because talking about security, I'm coming from a totally different angle. And not saying the other angle that already has been mentioned is not important, but when I hear that we are thinking about reducing vulnerabilities in the area of cybersecurity, that sounds nice. But on the other hand, actors in the same commission are thinking about trying to build backdoors in systems, so that people can get in. But once you have a backdoor, sooner or later, and I'm afraid very, very soon, different actors can use that backdoor. So what we are talking about? Cybersecurity, reducing vulnerabilities, or backdoors that can be used in the end by everybody. Also, as Kashmir was mentioning, everything is linked, and I think the whole debate about now surveillance and spyware has a long history. And it started, maybe I'm in this house since 2009, and latest then it already started. And we saw different debates trying already in past years to get more access to more data of more actors, more citizens. And first there was the excuse of, oh, we have to fight back terrorism. And therefore we need to have access to all data of all citizens, because you never know which person in the end might become a terrorist. This was working a little bit, but not good enough. So now it's protecting children. Oh, we have to protect our poor children. And therefore we again have to collect data from everybody at any time on every platform, because you never know which citizen might be a pedophile or something like that. And we forget, by doing this, collecting everything from everybody, and data retention will be an important part. What kind of data, from whom, for how long, and why? And I was told, oh, we only retain the data as long as there is a suspicion or we haven't found a specific criminal. Okay, so if the criminal escapes and you don't find him within the next 10 years, we will keep the data. That's the answer. So, and we also forget about that if we try step by step, not in one legislative file, but step by step, to collect more files, reduce security, we reduce freedom and privacy with this legislating. We then take another part of privacy in another file again and again, and where will this end? And in the end, there is no privacy at all. And also, even children deserve some free spaces to develop their own personality. And they are not all confronted with crazy people. And some of them even identify the crazy pedophiles and make fun about them. Others are serious victims. But the question is, can we protect them? And there are debates, we should simply take them away from the internet. Will that work? Maybe it's better to, first of all, tell our children how to do it. And the other thing is, we have a problem with implementation of rules, not only when it comes to data protection, to DSA and anything else. And I have the impression we are lacking behind. We are much too friendly to the big platforms instead of insisting following the rules. I'm sorry, I shouldn't speak that much in the middle of the debate, but this debate about security and data was really alerting me a little bit. And maybe just a question. I'm sorry, I did not follow the debates of the EMFA in all the details, but I really therefore have a question. You mentioned that there is no explicit exception for national security within EMFA. But then you mentioned a kind of exception mentioning essential state function could be endangered. To be honest, I don't see if there is a big difference. Maybe we simply don't have a definition of essential state function. Could it be the same as national security, so the exception is there? Just a question.
Do you want to take it? Do you want to answer that question?
Yes, with pleasure. And of course, on this issue of national security, there is not such thing as too much explanation or too much discussion, or probably. So the article itself says that member states' responsibilities as laid down in the treaties are respected, and it's through by reading the treaty that you find reference to essential state functions. But it's the phrasing itself is important, because it says responsibilities as laid down are respected, and then through the interpretations by the Court of Justice, you realize that the real responsibility of member state is define what are those essential interests and national security interests, without actually escaping the scrutiny of the European Court of Justice in line with the union law. So that's how it works.
Thank you very much. Are there further questions?
We have a question from the online, so I will read it out loud. From Meredith Bates, for the panel, what practical avenues for remedy does Francesco and other victims in the EU currently have to access justice? Addressing individual cases is just as critical as discussing the bigger picture systemic issue of no oversight.
Thank you, Meredith, for that great question. Francesco, would you like to come in on this?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, I can tell you my case. So in Italy, we are a cluster, of course, in FanPage, because we are two journalists and we have a legal office who's helping us to make a lawsuit in the Naples tribunal, Naples court. Then the trade union of journalists, the FNSI, joined us, and even the journalist order joined us and made a lawsuit in Rome. And then we, well, the two lawsuits went together. So now Rome is on everything. And so we are together. Of course, a class action or a sort of, collective lawsuit, I think would be very effective in order, well, of course, if it helps us to find out the truth. But right now we are doing it as a FanPage cluster. A lot of people told us to make a sort of class action together. We are a little few cases that exposed, so right now is no, we didn't find it necessary or useful.
Can I just add to what Francesco was highlighting, also as a broader pattern, when it comes to this dependency on the fact that victims will end up bringing the cases to court. It's a lot of time, money, effort, which is rarely ever available for the victims. It also is not as straightforward as one might think in terms of, in many cases, exactly with Francesco's case, there is no admissal from the state that they were the ones that targeted the victim. And therefore, there's always this question of, well, did the targeting happen? Who did it? Who do we go to? Who do we bring the case against? Is it against the state? Is it against the company? If the company is not European, where? Do we bring it in Israel? That's not going to happen. Do we bring it in the US? That's also unclear. So it's a very rigid road, if there is a road. So I would say that this high dependency and the huge burden of proof being placed on the victims, especially after going through something like this, and the assumption that they are willing and able to bring the cases in the first place is highly flawed, and we will never be in a proactive place to fight this abusive state that we are in. We'll keep playing whack-a-mole with waiting for a case to go. There's a statute of limitations. It's just not as simple as waiting for the victim to bring the case to a court. And in many cases, the cases don't even reach the level of being brought to a court.
Is there any more? Would you like to comment on this one?
Yeah, maybe very briefly. I mean, I fully agree that any litigation is a long and painful road, and it might even amount to secondary victimization for people to have to go through that. Having said that, it's still probably the best way to hold states accountable. And maybe you might be surprised why a representative of a member state says it, but there is a case that basically on Pegasus, or actually on the legal framework in Poland, that was won by Panoptykon Foundation, the Pietrzak case, and I think this case paves the way also for subsequent claims that can be made. So as laborious as it is, and I agree that it should not be the way it is, it still offers a certain certainty for people that they can ultimately benefit from. And I wish, this path would be shorter and easier, but they still are there for them to take.
The question of access to justice, I think, is much broader than only the question, can I go to court? First of all, if someone is using spyware going into one of your devices, it's not only that you are the victim, the target, because we are all exchanging a lot of information, texts, pictures with a lot of other people, both regarding business, politics, private life. So also other people will be affected by that. Second, the question is, why is it that you are surveyed? I think Francesco still doesn't know why, what is the reason. Italy is saying, no, it's not us. But then shouldn't it be that the state, the member state, who has an obligation to protect its citizens, should have an interest to find out who the hell is spying on my citizens? So, and maybe also, it's not a question of someone is trying to commit a crime while surveying a person. Maybe it's simply to find out if someone, an investigative journalist, could find out something that I don't want to go public. So I go into it just to find out what the journalist is working in, could be, and then try to put pressure to stop that person from doing it. Maybe the purpose is to manipulate public opinion. We don't know. And is that then a good opportunity to go to court, or do we need other steps? So I think the issue is much broader than finding a technical way to support victims, journalists to go to court. And I think to some extent, it's important to raise, and I hope this day is also heading and putting forward a little bit this, is to raise awareness, how big the damage can be if this is happening, not only for individual persons, but for the whole of society and for democracy.
Yes, and member states are starting to wake up to that question, and we see that might be the reason why initiatives like the Palmal process are moving along. And it's an interesting initiative that we definitely should be keeping a closer eye in the European Union, particularly perhaps the European Parliament could devote further attention to the progress of this initiative. Also, the Commission could take a closer eye as to what is happening there. I know the member states are, and Kazik, you want to comment on this question?
I mean, I just got inspired by what Mississippi was saying. Like when I was mentioning at the beginning how all this undermines the entire system the way we knew it, and maybe we should build an updated one, a new one, with rigid control mechanisms. I would absolutely see, and this is as off the record as it can be in this forum, I could absolutely see a system within which once once it's been proven or it's been clear that the way data processed on you has been done in breach of the rules, there is a fast track that gives you almost like with the delayed plane, basically a compensation, instead of going to the civil court and claiming non-material damage that might occur, might have not occurred, and to prove it. So basically, if we are to one day design such a system, maybe this should be part of it for the upcoming presidency of Poland in 15 years, basically. Well, hopefully earlier.
We're going to take that as an idea for our advocacy purposes. Thank you. I know there was another question in the room. There is another written question, and I know you had your hand up. Do you want to comment on that? No.
Thank you. It was just on the discussion from before, because I'm half Dutch, and I know that in the Netherlands there was a referendum in 2017 or 2018 where the upper house and lower house, they voted in favor of a new legislation to allow the government to expand its spy operations precisely against terrorism. That was the reason, national security. I don't know enough about the topic actually to be for or against. And then they put it to a referendum, and the people narrowly voted no, and they actually respected that. So I was curious what you thought of that approach, where they gave the people like a direct voice, which I thought was an interesting thing to have done, actually. And I think the result shows that the people narrowly were more in favor of respecting their privacy. But it came to mind during the discussion, and I was curious about what the opinions were on this kind of approach from a government.
That's a very interesting question. Would you like to take it?
I can answer just from a campaigning perspective as civil society. Obviously, if there is a chance for public opinion to be heard, we would love it. That's a chance for us to be campaigning and raising awareness and finally having the public have a say. But also, with this debate specifically, I would be mindful of the power of the state to manipulate information and to manipulate public opinion, from the sense of like this constant presentation of the false dichotomy between privacy and security. And in the current environment we are living in, beyond the EU even, like if we are thinking about something like this happening in Latin America, for example, in some states, there will always be a public concern, obviously, for safety when it comes to serious crimes, whether it is a history or culture of a fear of whether it's terrorism, drugs, mafia, whatever. All of these things are obviously very legitimate concerns for the public as well. I think that it presents us with the chance to obviously raise awareness around how invasive these tools are versus other effective measures to maintain public security. I think that this approach works in some instances, but in other instances it might actually be a slippery slope.
Yeah, just very briefly, I mean, I cannot agree more. I think we're all in Brussels probably a bit traumatized with the word referendum after Brexit. But I think you are right that ultimately, you see, I think ultimately the idea of referendum was created exactly to answer questions like this. But I think like my colleague, I would regrettably probably be a bit afraid that it might be organized in a way that doesn't necessarily encourages open discussion. But I would reintroduce somehow the democratic voice in the context of the oversight mechanism that I think the parliaments really need to exercise. It's difficult to define it to design it in a way that works. The EP has this exercise with Europol in the Joint Parliamentary Scrutiny Group. Let's say I will leave it to Mississippi to give her a review on that exercise. But it shows certain opportunities, but also certain limitations. But I would try to channel that that idea through that angle, basically.
But a political one.
Before I give you the floor a second time, I know there is a question over there, and there is a written question that's been there for a while. Joanna, if you want to read it out, please.
Yes, so it's from Elena Castillo Jimenez from Amnesty International. So for Francesco, what would remedy look like to you? What do you think the EU and member states should do to prevent this from happening again?
Well, thank you for the question to Elena Castillo Jimenez. And well, I'm not a politician. I can only talk to my case and try more or less to figure out what I expected more and what I saw. And what I saw is that I need for more transparency. So public register, independent public register for these spyware. And I think that there is the need to enforce a stronger legislation in order to prevent and to punish more effectively all the people that are targeting journalists and activists. And I think it's important, I think it's important to limitate a lot what the use of spyware could be. That it's an important instrument to enforce the law with criminals, within terrorists or something like that, as you said before. But well, the other side of the moon is that you can use it to control everyone. And of course, if you say everyone should be a terrorist, you can spy on everyone. So there is the need for more transparency and the need for a stronger legislation in order to prevent abuse.
Thank you, Francesco. That was very direct answer. Alyosha, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, hi, everyone, and thanks for organizing this very relevant panel. My name is Alyosha. I come from European Digital Rights, which is a network of digital rights organizations across Europe. I had two quick questions directed to the Council and the Commission. So first, I was really positively surprised by Mr. Ujazdowski's referral that the current legal system is being overwhelmed by these tools and their capabilities. We also share that, so we just come from publishing a human rights-based report on the use of spyware and its effects, and we came to the conclusion that the proportionality and the necessity of the use of these tools cannot be met in the former way of using this tool. So my question is, so you said that it is clear that in some cases, having access to a whole phone, like in 1 second, you have access to everything, to the whole life of a person without any limitations and so on. You said that clearly that probably overcomes several human rights, the right to privacy, but also right to fair trial, right to access to justice, and so on. So why are the states, or have you heard about the states discussing about another approach? Because for me now the approach is, okay, we know all of this goes against even the charter, which says that to limit a human right you have to be necessary and proportional, but we will let them do it until we find a way of changing our legal systems to accommodate that. Why don't we do it the other way around and say, let's stop this, because this is clearly illegal in our current framework, and if we want to start using tools that are as invasive as this, let's first do this adaptation and think about how can they be human rights compliant. Because for me, this whole approach is a bit clearly against what the charter stands for, but also against the rule of law and the basic rule of law commitments of states. So whether this approach has been mentioned. And also the second thing, question for the Commission is, the capabilities of this type of tools are now being shaped by the market, because there's a free market of vendors that profit from this and that can do the tools in the way that they want. And the current market is, full of opacity, of fake companies that are shielding, so you cannot track the money, and so on. So, doesn't the European Commission see this as a threat to its internal security as well? Because the trade of the vulnerabilities that lies behind this this market is giving incentives for people to try and break into our systems and make us all unsafe. So, whether we can expect something regarding the control of this market, because again, also for national security reasons, it would be a smart move for the EU to say, let's stop private vendors from doing it, and maybe we will do it. So yeah, those are the two questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that very comprehensive question. I think it's addressed to both of you, Casimir. What do you have, if you want to say? You have a few minutes to compose your thoughts about it.
Yeah, I agree with you that the sequence that you described. First, we identified the operational needs. We identify that there's only intrusive spyware that we can use to get this data, and we prove that we actually need to get this data. Let's say we've proven that, and then we build a system around that. I think you are right, this is how it's supposed to be done. But then a bit of a pessimist in me would say, but it's never really been done like that. And I think the democratic process of legislation is, as Mrs. Sippel said, always a bit lagging behind the fait accompli. Huh? And the fait accompli is that, and this is, here I would try to maybe slightly balance my pro-fundamental rights intervention at the beginning by saying, whether law enforcement authorities are right or are not right, we know for the fact from the Polish experience that for some of cases, the temptation or the need to use intrusive tools has truly been justified by the conviction that this is the only thing we can do to get A or to do B or to prevent from C. Now, as a lawmakers or as political leaders, we might say, listen, you might be right, but this is not how it should be done, and this is where the parliament steps in, the government step in. But I just wanted to illustrate that it's not, it's maybe sometimes a little bit more nuanced, and there's maybe less bad faith. I would never say that there was no bad faith with absolutely egregious cases that there are a reason why we are meeting here. And I'm not talking about Pegasus, but we're talking about, I don't know, Sky ECC case. In a way, it's been a very innovative operation trying to deal with a huge criminal network, and it worked. Now, I was back then in the ADPS, and we were kind of overseeing Europol in this context, and we saw that basically the legal framework doesn't really fit with this reality anymore. We didn't really have actually tools to deal with that. We could sense that. I will not tell what we could sense, but and as a result, I think soon after there was a legislation on Europol. Now it's another story. What kind of legislation was it? But it shows that there is action and there is reaction. So that's maybe a bit of a pragmatic explanation, but that all doesn't justify why one should ignore what you said, namely that ideally we should aim at indeed first identifying problems and then addressing them properly, not vice versa.
Yeah, so first of all, I would like to contribute indeed to this debate that perhaps those tools are so disproportionate that traditional safeguards do not really work any longer, and at least in the media field, there is, in a way, a solution, which is that Article 4, of course, it allows member states to go further and to have even better protections for journalists and member states. And already as a starting point, some member states have so-called absolute protection of journalistic sources and confidential communications. And we do see some indications that as a result of EMFA, it's likely that a few member states will make this choice and will upgrade their defenses of journalists and media in that respect. So that would in a way be a right response when you think about it to the disproportionate nature of these tools. Then about indeed the market and commercial actors appearing and what should we do about it? So of course we will probably step up a little bit our following of Appleball process and the voluntary code that is being prepared there. Then I noted with interest this idea of some kind of transparent register of providers which abide by standards and then could be considered as a trusted provider of such technology. So ideas like that are very interesting. Of course, so far no debate yet within the Commission, so we still have to have debate on that.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time. We're almost at the end, but I know there is one pressing question in writing.
Yes, there is one question from Susan Smalley for Francesco. So who exactly are you suing and what do you hope your lawsuit will accomplish? Are you suing as an individual or is FanPage as a whole suing? Thank you.
We are suing unknown because we don't know who spied on us. And we want our hope that our lawsuit will accomplish is to find who spied on us. We're doing a journalist investigation, of course, and we are suing in order to find out. That's the only point of this investigation. And we're suing as an individual, not as a FanPage as a whole thing, but we are followed by the same lawyer, by the lawyer of our media company, and we work together and we coordinate together in order to find out who spied on us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know there were other questions, but maybe we can take those questions later in the drinks that follow this the debate. I would like now to give the floor to Birgit for closing remarks, but first, thank you so much for your very interesting and poignant questions. That was very good and very welcome. So Birgit, you have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you also from my side to the panelists here, to Francesco, whom I met shortly before this in Roma, and also thank you to all the people here in the room and to the questions. I think what we debated this evening made it clear that yes, of course, we have to raise awareness regarding the question of surveillance and the use of spyware, the damages that easily can be done, and also the question if seriously some kind of spyware might be useful to fight back some crime. At least we need clear rules and we need some more sophisticated ways to do that instead of simply saying, oh, we need to create some backdoors. So some open questions there. In the overall situation, I think we also identified the fact that the whole issue of surveillance and on the other side, protecting privacy and fundamental rights is much broader than focusing on spyware. And we haven't yet even touched, at least not this evening, on the question of artificial intelligence, biometric surveillance and other things. And all this is part of an environment that might deliver some very positive aspects for citizens in different areas, but which also has the power to destroy democracy and create, I think someone mentioned it this evening, to create a kind of a digital autocracy where people are lost and surveyed all the time. and change their behavior and don't feel free any longer. So with that, we should not give up hope that the European Union in the end will again find its way to be a European Union of values, that we can fight back all those who are not in favor of this, and therefore that we find a way to better deal with security, but also protecting freedom and rights of people. And therefore, once again, thank you very much for taking part in this debate. And hopefully, after the official closure of this meeting, we might also have some minutes to exchange individually. Thank you very much.
There is indeed some refreshments, so stay back. Join us for an informal conversation now to pick up on the points that were still open. Thank you so much.